Welcome to my show. I'm a guest here. His name is Jason Del Gandio. Mr. Jason, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Jason. Firstly, you have a PhD in communication studies. You're also an author and an award-winning teacher. Can you please, sir, discuss more about yourself and how you're doing currently now, sir?
Yeah, sure. So again, my name is Jason Del Gandio. I'm a college professor at Temple University in Philadelphia. At Temple University, my expertise is the theory and practice of social justice with a focus on activism and social movements. So I essentially study how human beings create positive social change. However, outside of Temple, my other expertise is the study of vibes. So vibe, vibrations, energy, flow, buzz, mood, atmosphere, etc. And I've been studying vibes on and off for about 30 years. My latest project with the vibes is called 20 Minute Vibe or 20minutevibe.com. And on that website, I offer videos, online courses, essays, workshops, one-on-one discussions, etc. And so I'm essentially helping people to articulate their experience of and ideas about vibes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jason. And are you also planning to write more book in the coming future, sir?
Yes, I'm actually working on a book right now. It's tentatively entitled Vibe Talk: How and Why People Talk About Vibes. So it's exploring how different people across the country, but also across the world, talk about this thing that we call the vibe, right? So what is it? How do we define it? How do we explain it? What are some examples in popular culture and scholarly literature, in sports, in music, etc.?
Thank you so much, Mr. Jason. And I would love to dive more on the point of vibes. Personally, for me, I do not know. The only vibe I know was the one I usually hear in the music. In our own Afrobeat here, we say you have vibes, but I do not know if it is the same vibe we are saying here. I would like to know, sir, what do you think is vibes? Like, how can you explain what vibes is, sir?
Sure. Well, first, I invite your listeners to think about how often they use the word vibe or some variation thereof, and how
Mm,
often they encounter someone else using the word vibe. And again, it could be vibe, vibes in the plural, vibrations, mood, atmosphere, energy, etc. All right. So just over the next week, take inventory. And I would say you'll probably be surprised about how often you encounter the term. But of course, the question then becomes, how do you define and explain a vibe? All right. So the most basic definition I can give you is that a vibe is the exchange of energy between you and other people. So again, a vibe is the exchange of energy between you and other people. But of course, the question then becomes, what is the nature of this quote unquote energy? So, for instance, is this energy physical or metaphysical? Is it material or immaterial? Is it scientific or spiritual? Or perhaps all these things at the same time? All right. So, what I'm saying here is that I'm trying to invite your listeners to think about their understanding of this word vibe and how they experience it, how they think about it, how they articulate it, how they define it, and so on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jason. And there will also be ways, one experience these vibes. Probably one might not notice that this vibe is there, but there will also be, ways and example of how, several people experience vibe. What do you think are some basic example of when we experience vibes, Mr. Jason?
Sure, there are all kinds of examples. So for instance, think of going on a first date, right? And on that first date, you're trying to see if you and the other person connect with each other, right? And if you have a connection, though, we often translate that connection into a vibe, right? So it was a good vibe, it was a bad vibe, it was a romantic vibe, a sexual vibe, a platonic vibe, etc. Right? But that's one kind of example. Another example might be at a sporting event, right? You're there with hundreds or thousands of other people. You're cheering for your favorite team, right? Your team is down by a point or two. It's the end of the game. Then suddenly your team pulls it off and they win. And all the fans go crazy and you're vibing together. You feel that energy. You feel that electricity running through the crowd. A similar example would be going to see live music. right? So again, you're there with maybe a small handful of people, or maybe even thousands of people, right? But you're all listening to the same music, you have the same
Hmm.
intention, you're all trying to have fun, and you literally start to fall into rhythm with each other. And you can feel that rhythm, you can feel that energy, you can feel that synchronicity with the crowd, with the musicians, with the band, etc. Right? Now, of course, though, you can also go on the other end, on the negative side. It's like, well, maybe you had an argument with your best friend or a family member, and the vibe between you and the other person is off for less than a day, maybe for a few weeks, etc. Right? So these are all basic examples where we experience this quote unquote exchange of energy, or in other words, we experience this thing we call a vibe.
That's very nice. Thank you so much, Mr. Jason. And I do not know, personally, if vibe is something we do learn. I do remember you said it's an exchange of energy. So the energy is there when someone have vibe. But how do you think we can learn to feel and also use the vibe that we have, sir?
Yeah. So there are a few steps I often walk people through, right? And so first, become more aware of your body, right? How are you feeling on the inside? How are you feeling on the outside? What's your emotional state, right? Like, but become more aware of your body. Then, at the same time, be also become more aware of your surroundings. Where are you? Who are you with? What's happening in your immediate environment? How might those interactions be affecting your emotional state, your psychological outlook, etc. All right. Then from there, though, also try to soften your perception and soften your ego. In other words, think less with your conscious mind and instead allow your subconscious mind, right, to speak back to your conscious mind. Right? So you want to be more present in your body, more present in your surroundings, and then again, try not to see the world through your, let's say, reified perception, but rather soften your mind a little bit. Right? Then from there, though, try to imagine that your body is radiating some kind of energy or vibe out into the world. And then from there, try to lean into this exchange of energy between you and other people. All right. And what you want to do is try to lead with that feeling, lead with that energy, lead with that vibe. Now, the tricky part here, though, is you have to try to learn how to distinguish between, let's say, your emotions, your intuition, and your vibes. All these things are similar and they overlap, but they're not exactly the same. So again, trying to learn to distinguish between how I feel emotionally, right? Then what is my intuition telling me? But then also, what is this vibe that's happening between us?
Hmm. Thank you for the insight, Mr. Jason. Thank you so much, sir. And I would also like to go to the point of communication. No matter what we want to achieve, or no matter how we want to use these vibes, use this energy, they have to be communication. Do you think vibe can be used as a form of communication, Jason?
Yes, I do. First, to back up here a bit, I want your listeners to realize there are different kinds of communication, different modes of communication. So, for instance, we have verbal communication that includes language. Then we have nonverbal communication, which is more of your hand gestures, facial expressions, the way you walk, the way you move, etc. Right? Then you also have this thing we call the vibe. Right? Now, with the vibe, though, it's different than language in the sense that language is very specific and concrete. So if I say to you, "Hello, how are you doing today?" You know I'm speaking to you, you know how to address me, etc. With a vibe, though, it's more elusive and suggestive, right? And here, what you're trying to do, though, is kind of set your intention and set your mindset, and then try to emanate or try to project a particular type of vibe in the right way at the right time. Now, to do this, though, you have to learn how to read the situation, right? Try to figure out what vibe is happening here around me, and then what vibe is needed so I can live up to this moment in the situation. In other words, do I need to lift people up? Do I need to pull people in? Do I need to energize the room, or maybe I have to subdue the room, right? And then from there, though, try to be aware of how people are responding to the vibe you're giving off, right? Are you getting the reaction that you want? If you are, then keep doing it. But if you're not, then try something different, right? So, for instance, think about going to a job interview, right? And you're trying to impress the interviewer, trying to get this job, right? Well, how might you use your vibe in that situation to leave a lasting impression, to be more inviting, to be more open, to show them that you're eager, etc. Right. So really, it's a learning process of learning how to project the right vibe at the right time with the right people.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jason. And I would also like to dive more on the point of meditation. We all know meditation is a place, have this inner peace. have this nature, live, have this peaceful, just to have the connection with the nature. I do not personally know how it does connect with the vibe too, but how do you think mindfulness practices or meditation support clearer communication with our vibes, sir?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first, I want to let your listeners know that I'm an advocate and practitioner of both mindfulness and meditation. I
Okay.
meditate almost every morning, anywhere from 5 minutes to a half hour, depending on what my day's like, right? And I have found it over the last decade or so that it's very much helpful in my personal life, all right? Now, with these practices of mindfulness and meditation, I think the big thing here, and you've already said this a little bit, the big thing here with mindfulness and meditation is that they can help us to center ourselves, right? They can help us to be more present, to become more aware, more in touch with ourselves, and also more in touch with our situations. Right? And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Right? So, meditation and mindfulness can help us become more aware of our bodies and our surroundings, and they also help us to again soften our perception and ego, right? And it allows us to feel ourselves into the situation. So again, rather than thinking with our conscious mind, right, when we're more mindful and more at peace with ourselves, we allow ourselves to think with our whole body. We allow ourselves to think with the whole situation, and then from there, though, we become more attuned to the ebb and flow of life around us. And this type of emotional and psychological orientation opens you up to the world of vibes. And so I would say that vibes go hand in hand with meditation and mindfulness and similar kinds of practices.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, Mr. Jason. And we have to also go to the point of practices that could be recommended when it comes to someone maintaining that positive ground. I remember you said that when someone have gotten that vibe that does work for him or her, he or she could continue. But if someone find that it isn't working, then someone should have to make that shift. Now, if one have tried to get that vibe that definitely works for he or her, there should be a way someone can maintain that vibe consistently. What do you think are some practices you recommend to maintain a positive, grounded, and aligned vibe consistently, Mr. Jason?
Well, I think the key word here is practice itself, right? So we
Okay.
tend to think of the vibe as just simply happening on its own, which is that is partially true. There's always a vibe to every person, every situation. But if you want to become more of an expert in, let's say, vibe discourse and vibe communication and vibe experience, you do have to practice on a daily basis, right? So trying to develop a vibe practice, for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, etc. In other words, spend a few minutes each day trying to feel the world in a deeper manner. Right? And you can ask yourself some basic questions, right? So when you wake up in the morning, or perhaps before you go to bed, you can ask yourself, "What's my vibe right now? Right? How am I feeling? What kind of vibe am I giving off into the world?" Right? Likewise, as you're moving throughout your day, what's the vibe of the people that are around you? Right? What's the vibe of the situation? What's the vibe of the room? What's the vibe of my housemates or my romantic partner or my friends? Right? And you're trying to become more aware, consciously aware of the vibes that surround you. Right? Then from there, though, once you're more aware of that, you develop more ability to be able to change your vibe if you need to, right? So, how might I be more open to people, more inviting, more self confident? And you're trying to experiment with how you feel and the kind of the feeling that you're projecting out into the world, right? Now, a lot of this has to do with how you establish your mindsets. So, for instance, there's a reciprocal relationship between how we think and how we feel. So, again, there's a relationship between how I think in my mind and how I feel in my body. Right. So the question then becomes, how do I train my mind to be more positive, right? And thereby train my vibe to also be more positive. Now, when I say this, none of this is easy, right? A lot of people want a quick fix or an easy fix, but that's not really how human beings are built, right? Thoughts and vibes are a habit, right? And it takes hard work and a conscious effort to change both of those habits. So, how do I train my mindset? How do I train my thinking pattern? But then also, how do I train the vibe that I'm giving off? Again, this is not easy, but it is possible with practice and effort.
Yes, I completely agree, Mr. Jason. And lastly, some people will want to, branch to this vibe. Okay, I think I can get to this point of having enough energy, having enough way to, drive more communication. Like, what advice do you think you can give to someone who wants to start to explore the concept of vibe communication and also wanting to make it a core part of their life, Mr. Jason?
Yeah, again, another great question here. So I would begin with inviting your listeners to open themselves up to the very possibility of vibes, right? Um, So rather than shutting yourself off to vibes and vibe communication, things like that, be more open to it, be more open minded, and be on the lookout for it. In other words, how do I feel? How do other people feel? And how we interact with each other through our vibes. Right. But then also realize though that all of this is a learning experience, like everything else. Right. You have to spend time practicing it, like I said before. Right. So spend some time each day thinking about vibes, questioning vibes, trying to define and explain vibes, but also then practicing vibes. Right. So like I said before, right. Whether it's in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening, but taking inventory by the different types of vibe experiences you're having, right, and then trying to articulate them to yourself in your own mind. Right? At the same time, I would suggest trying to be open to experimenting with different kinds of vibes and see what works for you. All right. So let's say tomorrow you go to work, you're hanging out with your friends, and you're going to make a conscious effort to emanate and radiate a certain kind of feeling, a certain kind of vibe, and then see how people respond to you, see how they react to you. If you get a positive response, then that's a clue that you want to keep giving that vibe off. If you get a negative response or a response you don't want, then that's another suggestion or a clue that I might want to change this or try something different tomorrow. Right? But basically, in brief, it's really about making a habit of this, right? And developing a regular vibe practice, similar to meditation and mindfulness. So if you are a meditator, I'm not talking to you personally, but all of your listeners, if you meditate on a regular basis, right, then you know that takes practice. Same thing with mindfulness. Our minds tend to jump around a lot, and being mindful allows us to observe without judgment, right? But those things take practice. Likewise, with a vibe, lean into it, right, and learn how to develop your own vocabulary about energies, about vibrations, about moods and atmospheres, etc.
Hmm. Completely right. Thank you so much, Mr. Jason. And Mr. Jason, there's a question I normally ask her. From the ancestors, from the forefathers, there are a lot of things that do exist during our ancestral time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, what do you think it will be, Mr. Jason?
Wow, it's a great question. Putting me on the spot here. I don't have a ready-made answer for you. Um, and I don't know if it's a particular thing, but more of an orientation. And I wish that we as human beings would learn to be more humble and develop more humility, right, towards ourselves, to each other, right, and then recognize though that we are all interconnected in one way or another. So when we talk about vibes, we can also talk about a global vibe, right? So if each body gives off a vibe, and there are bodies all across the planet, there must be a global vibe, right? And so learning how that vibe influences on a daily basis, how we contribute to that vibe in both positive and negative ways, right? And then focusing on how we as human beings are interconnected and allow that to make us more humble in the face of each other. And I think that would allow us to be a better humanity, a better species, and have better interactions on a daily basis and try to avoid some of the catastrophes that we're facing as a planet.
I completely agree, Mr. Jason. And to add on that, adding vibe and humility is great. If someone is humble and he has this energy and vibe, a person is going to definitely move. A person is going to definitely have this humility, respect every single person he meets, and is also going to have this vibe of the way he or she is going to personally communicate, probably with elderly people, and even communicate with his colleague. I want to also sincerely thank you again, Mr. Jason, for the opportunity, for the time. Thank you for speaking on this vibe communication. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, sir. Have a wonderful day, Mr. Jason. Bye bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.